afternoon, members of the Mag Street Committee. This meeting is called to order. It is 1 p.m. We will now begin with a roll call of all the members. Steph, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we will start with Jennifer Acuna from FHWA. Grant Anderson, Youngtown.
Here.
Thank you. Charles Andrews, Peoria.
Here.
Thank you. Keith Brown, City of Maricopa. Bryce Christo, City of El Mirage. Jerry Cooper from Town of Paradise Valley. Maria Deeb, City of Mesa.
Here.
Thank you. Nathan Domi, City of Scottsdale.
Here.
Thank you. Keith Drunaski, City of Litchfield Park.
Here.
Thank you. Susanna Strubble as proxy for David Fabiano, Gilbert.
Here.
Thank you. Brian Harville, City of Goodyear.
This is Tina Sims. I'm proxying for Brian for Goodyear.
Thank you, Tina. I have you noted. Jennifer Jack from Salt River Pima. Jamie McCracken, City of Tolleson. Charlie Cerna as proxy for John McFarland, City of Chandler.
Here.
Thank you. Brad Novacek, Town of Queen Creek.
I am here.
Thank you. Steve O'Brien from ADOT.
Here.
Thank you. Dana Oswiani, City of Surprise.
Hi, I'm here.
Thank you. Randy Proch, City of Glendale.
Hi, Steph. I'm here.
Hey, Randy. Christopher Salas from Town of Florence. Raquel Schatz, Apache Junction.
Here.
Thank you. Corey Steele, City of Tempe.
I'm here.
Thank you. Raj Thowdam, City of Avondale. Leticia Vargas, City of Phoenix.
Here.
Thank you. Christopher Wanamaker, Pinell County. John Willett, City of Buckeye. All right, and Madam Chair, you are here, so let me just make sure we have a quorum.
And this is Scott Nodes. I'm a proxy for Keith Brown, City of Maricopa.
Oh, Scott, thank you so much. Is there anyone else I missed while we're at that?
Bryce Christo's here as well.
Thank you, Bryce. Okay.
Raj, do you have Avondale?
Raj, thank you. Noted. Okay. All right, Madam Chair, we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Steph. So with a quorum, this meeting of the Mag Street Committee is officially called to order. As a reminder, please mute your microphone to eliminate any feedback. You will have the opportunity to raise your hand in the chat to be recognized, at which time you can unmute your microphone to talk. When you begin speaking, please state your name and your organization. We'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is called to the audience. MAG provides the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda, or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. Members of the public are invited to submit written comments via the MAG website. Any comments received 2 hours prior to the meeting have been shared with committee members in advance of the meeting for consideration and will be included in the meeting minutes. Staff, have we received any online written comments for the call to the audience?
Madam Chair, we have not received any public comments for the call to audience or any other items on the agenda.
All right. We will move on to agenda item number 3, which is the Transportation Funding Program Manager Report. Patrick Stone will provide the report. Patrick, whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Street Committee. Pleasure to be here today. Of course, I wanted to start first by acknowledging our chair. Thank you, Angela. I've appreciated working with you these last 2 years as you served as chair of the Street Committee. Starting in January, Bryce Christo with the City of El Mirage will be ascending to the chair position, and Nathan Domi from the City of Scottsdale would become the new vice chair. Looking forward again to working with you all in the upcoming year. As you noted and noticed, Steph is assisting me with the street committee today. Mark Overton, who was staffing the committee, has left MAG as of November 27th. We wish him well in his other endeavors, but in the interim, Steph will be assisting me with street committee. I also wanted to introduce Carrie Kassler, who will be presenting agenda item 5. She's a new MAG staff member, started with us also on November 27th. Previously was an intern with us in our group and has now moved over. And she'll be actually assisting me with the oversight and administration of the ALCP. Next item, closeout funding for fiscal year 2024. If you've looked at the agenda for Transportation Review Committee, excuse me, on Thursday, closeout is on the agenda for consideration. MAG staff is recommending that we fund all closeout requests received. We did have sufficient funding to meet all requests received. Those requests will go to Regional Council on January 31st. As a note for agencies where this may apply, we have reached out to our partners at ADOT and informed them of potential closeout requests that will be coming to hopefully assist in any sorts of intergovernmental agreement amendments or other paperwork that might need to be done, hopefully to kind of accelerate the process and get things done sooner than later. First round of street sweepers, which you saw in October, were approved by Regional Council on November 29th. The balance of the street sweepers are part of the closeout package going to Regional Council next month. Once those are complete, we'll work with ADOT to get those projects funded, and Dean will be sending out a notice to proceed, hopefully very early in calendar year 2024. And then I'm going to hopefully attempt to share my screen. I wanted to provide an update of something that we've done with the TIP webpage. Let's see if this works. Hopefully, there we go. And so right now, what you're seeing is the TIP webpage. We actually did a refresh and a redesign. Hats off to Tanya Morrison, works there at MAG, was instrumental in getting this done. One thing we've done is condensed the website. You don't have to scroll as far down to find it. We've added this header bar across the top of the page. And where I really wanted to draw the committee's attention is there is now a grants feature. If you go to the grants page, it lists all of the current grant opportunities that member agencies might be interested in pursuing. Further down the page, there are some resources and tools to help you look at grants or find grants that might be applicable to your agency. And then two things I really wanted to note, there's a letters of support section. So if your agency is looking at a letter of support from MAG for a potential grant submission, you can follow the link there. And then at the very bottom where it says learn more, get email updates, you can subscribe to this page. And I strongly encourage that you do. When we do updates to this page, I send out email blasts that go out to all the subscribers, notifying them of changes to the page. The bigger thing is going to be when new grants get actually posted to the website. And with that, Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation, and I will stop sharing my screen.
All right. Do any of the committee members have any questions? All right. Hearing and seeing none. Thank you, Patrick. This agenda item is for information. So we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is approval of the consent agenda. Item 4A is on the consent agenda. Does any member of the committee have questions or request a presentation on this item? All right, do we have a motion to approve the consent item?
Motion to approve as is.
All right, do we have a second?
This is Novacek, I second.
All right, we have Maria as the motion and Brad as the second. We will have those participating in the meeting online take part in a voice vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. We need to see faces of everyone to participate in the voice vote. This is to speed up the voting process. For those of you who cannot or do not wish to turn on their cameras, staff will conduct a roll call vote. Staff will only call on those virtual participants who did not turn on their camera. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call so that staff can count the people's names whose cameras are not on. All right, staff, can you take a roll call of the members participating virtually who do not have their cameras on? And Max, this is a new thing for the committee members, so you may need to help us out a little bit on this.
Sure thing, Madam Chair. Give me just a moment to see who has their screens on. Okay, hello, John. Saw you there. Okay, so just a few people to call on. Charles Andrews.
Hold on, Steph, and
Oh.
I apologize, Madam Chair. This may have been on me as part of the narrative I provided you. We first actually call the voice vote of all those who have their cameras on.
Oh,
We
that's
do
right.
that
Thank
vote,
you.
and then after that vote, we go and poll the members that did not participate virtually.
Thank you for that clarification,
Yeah,
Patrick.
no worries.
All right, so anyone that has their cameras on, I will have you unmute.
Call for the vote.
And does everyone that has their cameras on say aye?
Aye.
Any of those say nay?
Aye.
All right. Now, Steph, anyone that doesn't have their camera on, will you go through the roll call?
Absolutely, yes. We have Bryce Christo,
Aye.
Charles Andrews,
Aye.
and then Bryce, is this you with the phone number ending in 8116?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I just had you up there twice. Okay, Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
All right. With the approval of the consent agenda, we will move on to agenda item number 5. Agenda item number 5 on the agenda will be presented by Carrie Kassler, MAG Transportation Planner. The item is on the agenda for information and discussion. So whenever you're ready, Carrie.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of Street Committee. My name is Carrie Lynn Kassler, and as Patrick introduced me earlier, I'm the new transportation planner here at MAG. I'm pleased to meet you all and to be working with you. Today, I will be giving a summary of and introducing microtrenching and hopefully facilitating a discussion on how this new technology might be emerging in your agencies. Next slide, please. So microtrenching is a technique of cutting thin channels into roadways and other right-of-ways in which to lay fiber cables. A cutting wheel saws microtrenches ranging from a 1/2 inch to 2 inches in width and at a maximum depth of 2 feet. Once our microtrenches are cut into the road, installers then lay the cables protective ducts through which they pull or push the fiber optic cables. So the picture on the left shows the ducts where the fiber cables are fed through. As you can see, there are several ducts within each cable. So if the utility company only utilizes 3 out of the 7 ducts, for example, they could sell the other duct space to other companies to use. Finally, the contractors pour or pump the infill resin into the microtrench. An ideal infill system will include 2 layers. The first layer will be dyed a bright orange as a dig safe indicator. And then a second application of the product will be put on top, which is pigmented to match the road color. The result on the road section where the infill system is installed is barely visible and is often stronger than the initial asphalt's cohesive strength. Next slide, please. There are several pros and cons regarding microtrenching. Some of the pros include that this is ideal for congested areas that are largely paved. Additionally, multiple conduits and utility lines can be inserted into one trench. It also minimizes the right-of-way needs since the contractor is operating in city-owned infrastructure. This makes installation much quicker and more cost-effective in regard to right-of-way. However, there are several cons related to this practice. Some include that the shallow depth of the fiber could make it more vulnerable to damage for contractors installing other utilities and more susceptible to roadway compression and deterioration. Specifically to consider is the impact of the freight lines, which are often the trucks normally drive on the right lane. So this is where the microtrenching is normally installed. So this could be potentially a a con or something to consider. And another thing that could be considered a con is the microtrench is in the bike lane, and this could affect the ride quality of those lanes. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'm going to open it up for discussion with you all about this topic. These are some questions that can sort of guide our discussion. But first, I'm going to pass it off to the City of Mesa, who has experience with microtrenching in their agency. So they will sort of start us off, and then any other agencies or people that want to jump in, please feel free to talk about your experience with this in your agency.
All right, Maria, what are you taking it for the City of Mesa?
I can if you so want. First of all, I was never told that I was going to lead this discussion, but I'm happy to do it. Yes, we have been doing microtrenching, but we do it in areas that are low bike traffic. As Carrie said, this can be placed in bike lanes, and we just don't want to introduce anything that can affect or possibly introduce obstacles. So I don't know. We at the city have looked into this, but really we look at our contractor to always do what the project objectives and scope of work is. But we do have it as a possible way that we can look at them doing any utility relocation, and we do assess what right-of-way needs are needed. I don't know if anybody has questions. I don't know, Carrie, what your goal is with this discussion.
Yeah, that was perfect. It's just super informal, just sort of getting some topics thrown out there for other agencies that might see this coming down the pipeline and need some resources of who has had experience already. So that was super helpful. Thank you. Does anybody else want to share their experience with this, or how you think your agency would approach microtrenching?
This is Brad Novacek from the town of Queen Creek. We're in the process right now of responding to some requests from some utility providers. We've been going through and in all appropriate acknowledgement, using the MESA details to look as a basis to start with. They have details and some specification work that's already been done. We've been, I will say, we have been looking at modifying it to fit things that are unique more, if you will, to the town and what some of our preferences are. One of the things we're looking at is running the trench along the bike lane line in the street so that it's not in the lane itself. One of our concerns has to do with providing enough clearance around water and sewer appurtenances, especially if they have to go back in to be dug out and maintained, because you will expose that cable and that conduit in that location if they're too close. And the other thing we're looking at is how do we maintain that trench, and what will it do? Some of the other possible detriments could be cracking of the pavement in that area, settlement in that area between the bike, where the trench is. One side might settle because water's gotten in. We have lovely soils out here that don't do well with water. So one of our goals is trying to keep water out of the subgrade. And so we're looking to see how that goes, but we are looking at implementing all these here within the coming month, essentially. We've been focused on it pretty well. So just wanted to pass that along.
Thank you for that. That's very valuable.
Well, this is Steve O'Brien from ADOT. ADOT has been using microtrench for fiber installation as part of our broadband expansion initiative by the governor's office. Typically, well, we've done microtrenching on I-17, I-40, and I-19 are the main routes that we're doing that on. We do microtrenching in the shoulder to avoid any issues associated with the travel lane. Found it very effective. Production rates are very good compared to a normal installation. If we were trenching for conduit, outside of the paved area. We've experimented a little bit with different mastic materials to fill in the trench. And I know we've made some minor modifications since our first one, but overall things have gone very well. Brad Burgess heads up our permits group and kind of responsible for the broadband expansion, would be a contact person. Or you can give me a call and I'll get you in touch with the resident engineers that have been on the projects or the project managers as far as the development plans.
Anderson, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Microtension is one thing, but what about just doing tunneling? That's being used for broadband expansion in quite a few areas also. Is that a trade-off, or why would the trenching not be utilized?
So Grant, we do some tunneling. It's typically when we get to our interchanges. We don't like to install anything on structures. So when we get to those locations, we will potentially do some tunneling in combination with the trenching to get the fiber, through the interchange areas and back up onto the main line.
So the restriction on tunneling then appears to be distance.
It might be, but from our perspective, from an interchange crossing, the interchange, the cross street, or in getting to the ramps, we've found that we haven't had any problem doing the tunneling in those locations.
Thank you.
Charles Andrews, City of Peoria. I just want to slip in here really quick. We've also been asked to look into it. And some of us did venture out to our friends there at Mesa. Thank you for your help with that. I guess my concerns, and I don't know if anyone has any information on it. My biggest concerns was, okay, great. We let them micro trench. How do they leave the asphalt? And I think someone talked about the mastic material. How long does it last? Does it become a long-term maintenance problem for the city? Are they going to pay for it? Are we going to pay for it? But bigger problems than that is, okay, so now we have to do a mill and fill. Now we need to take a couple inches off the top. I mean, they have to relocate? Where are they going to relocate to? Is it on the city's dime? On their dime? How quick can they do it? Because we need to move quickly. So yeah. And then reconstruction, you have to reconstruct your street. It does happen. What happens? Do we pay them? They pay us? Where are you going to put them in the interim? And I don't know if anyone's encountered that yet, since it's kind of a new technology, if you will. Thank you.
Yes, so I do want to respond. Microtrenching is not to be used everywhere, but it is a good option to entertain when we are reconstructing or doing a CIP project in which, due to the roadway work, we have to relocate utilities, as well as we have a lot of congestion in utilities, little right-of-way. This is one of the options. When we are developing a widening project, we generally do the utility relocation first, and then we do the roadway. So we don't just have to patch the pavement. Again, it's not to be used everywhere, and a good quality control is needed at all times when you're performing any work on city right-of-way.
Good point, Maria. Are there any other
Thank you, Maria.
agencies that?
Yeah, this is John, the City of Buckeye. I have a couple of questions, kind of tie on to what Charles just brought up, and then same with Steve O'Brien. And maybe you mentioned it when you started, and sorry if I missed it. Is there a minimum depth for the micro trench? Like, for example, in Buckeye, we have 6 inches of asphalt. Do we want their conduit completely below the asphalt depth, and they're only putting the 6 inches back in? Or are they only going like 4 inches deep, and it becomes that maintenance challenge that Charles brought up? And then I guess the second question is the request for this micro trenching, is it for a city CIP ITS fiber, or is it a non-public utility like Lumen or Cox or someone like that wanting to put the conduit in the roadway and their contractors asking for the micro transit or the micro trenching? I guess there's two different things there. Just kind of curious on what people's thoughts are.
This is Brad from Town of Queen Creek. We're looking at it for, it's a utility that's approaching us and wants to put in that, and they're responsible for all the maintenance. We're putting in our contracts that they have to move it out of the way. They have to do the replacements if we have to go in and do any maintenance. When we do our mill and fills, they're usually a couple of inches at the top, so we're trying to make sure that they're down below that. But one of our bigger issues, and I didn't mention this earlier, is, or I would say a concern, I don't want to say it's an issue, is how do you handle when the appurtenances, if they are outside, they have to get under the curb, they have to go to, if they're existing facilities, there might be landscaping and irrigation that's out there. And then also at intersections when we have our obvious conduits and cabling that connects all the traffic signals. I noticed ADOT seems to put pull boxes outside the edge of the shoulder, Steve, just on the edge. And I know that's a great idea, and that's we're trying to do that too. Maria, I believe Mesa's doing something similar. I don't think you necessarily have things in the roadway, but those are some. Another issue we have is we don't like having appurtenances in sidewalks because one, they're a trip hazard, and two, some people like to steal the lids. So then that just creates a bigger hazard. So those are some of our concerns, and we're trying to figure out how we're addressing those as well. So I hope that helps people.
John, with regards to trench depth, it's been a while since I looked at those plans, but I'll pull a set together and I'll send you over. But typically, I think our trench depth is much deeper for us than, say, the AC lift section. And I think someone already mentioned, yes, that conduit is always swept off. The pull boxes are installed outside of the shoulder area. Ours is kind of a combination. It's for ADOT, but it's also for privatization. And we're entering into an agreement with a private company to operate and maintain the node buildings and the fiber. You'll see dual pull boxes on a sweep out. One is for ADOT and one is for this private entity that'll be coming in and taking over the responsibility for maintaining and operating those. So ours isn't specifically just for us at this point. It's a combination for privatization as well as ADOT needs.
Thank you for that clarification, Steve. If we could, I don't want to halt this discussion because I think these are really great concerns. If we could just go to the next slide, and I've outlined some other concerns that might be helpful for the discussion. And one that I definitely wanted to point out was, and I guess this might be a question for Steve over at ADOT, is how are these geo-referenced and how are they documented for other projects to make sure that they're not being disturbed in other, unexpectedly?
We've got some painstaking requirements that the contractor has to do to geolocate the conduit and the fiber. I think it's every 50 feet. So we have a geospatial reference for that as part of our asset management. Yes, it adds cost to the project, but because of the impact, if this fiber were to ever be, hit because we were out there doing something else, made sense. So the contractor is responsible for providing the geospatial requirements as built on the project. And then that is all kept in an asset management system so that we have that in perpetuity, and we can provide that to the company that's going to come in and potentially maintain and operate.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Anybody else want to chime in?
So this is Susanna Struble with the town of Gilbert. We're in the process right now of kind of researching a lot of this and developing a spec. We have not put that in place yet, but definitely reaching out to other agencies as we're going through that and moving forward. We are probably within, I would say, the next couple months of finalizing that product and being able to use it. And a lot of what you guys are talking about here is included in what we're trying to capture in our permitting and standards for this.
So I guess we can stir the pot a little bit and maybe encourage some other conversation, because I do think there's some interesting points here. One thing more of a, as you see on the slide deck, we had the intra-agency coordination. I think interagency, as Carrie and I were talking about this topic beforehand, these utility providers don't necessarily look at geographic and municipal boundaries. I don't know if anyone's experienced it yet, but we'll be curious to see if if a private utility or a private provider comes in and approaches and says, hey, you know what, we actually want to run it along this roadway. We're going to hit Gilbert and Queen Creek together. And then that, multi-jurisdictional coordination, I think that will be interesting to see. Susanna, I think it's really interesting. And I think maybe something for the group, and Steve, I don't know if you have it, but are we developing standard specs for this item so that if you've not been approached yet, if and when a company comes in and says, hey, we're really interested in doing this, how do you handle that? And are the right entities within your organization talking to each other such that, the economic development folks, the permitting folks are talking to the public works and street folks to say, hey, we've got this thing coming up.
So Patrick, I would say for the city of Mesa, everything is done through permits, and development services gets any permit, and that has to go to each department for them to look at it and comment on any plan before it becomes an action within the city boundaries. But we only permit work within the city, so we don't have any coordination with other cities and telling them what could be done within their city or town jurisdiction.
And Patrick, for ADOT, since these are our projects, yes, we don't have standard specifications included in the Red Book yet, but we do have stored specifications for a number of these elements of things that we're doing, the trench depth, the fill material, the sweeps, node locations, things like that. And that's all information that can be shared with any other agency if it makes sense, for another agency to use. But again, they're specific to what ADOT needs at this point.
Yeah, and I think maybe it was Brad that brought that up. I think it will be very interesting to see how this evolves throughout the region. One question for you, Maria, thinking about it, obviously, sort of looking as an early adopter standard for this. When you guys were doing this micro trenching, are you being approached as standalone projects? Are you including them as part of, these were already in our CIP and it's just another work element to that project?
So Patrick, I don't know specifics, but everybody has heard of the big rush that Google has to install new. So they have been doing a lot. And I think that it was first introduced to the city because of that, and because they wanted to reach many areas fast and get the minimum impact in already busy constructed areas.
No, that makes sense. Thank you.
If I can bounce off what Maria said, I just looked through my notes here. They're proposing, they're not waiting for us to build new streets so we can put their facilities in as a coordinated CIP effort. They want it in a certain route, certain corridors, and they want to do it ASAP. And they have, done their work by lobbying the right people here, obviously. So that's why we're kind of scrambling to make sure that, both needs can be met. I think there was a question how deep. they basically threw out 2.5 inches, which kind of put a little red flag in my head, because that's, well, ultimately you're going to have to maintain the road. How are you going to, if you need to phase your construction, your reconstruction, where do you relocate them? That was my main concerns. And there's a bunch of others too, as probably Brad has brought up. There's a lot other ones. So I'd like to, if possible, continue this coordination between the different cities, and if we can share, because if we can share, maybe we can standardize the work.
Just a question for the committee. Are there any agencies out there that prohibit micro trenching already? Again, in more of a newer thing, but does anyone just not allow it? Okay. I didn't think anyone would speak up, but I thought I'd ask the question.
We don't particularly like it. Staff doesn't like it.
Yeah.
But this is coming from the top that we're going to do it. So we need to come to some kind of agreement.
Understood.
Yeah. And again, maybe, we have to think through carefully of all the pros and cons, like you started here, and see if, again, both parties, the city and whoever it is, Google or whoever, can be served.
Same here, where we would prefer not to do it as well, but know that we're probably going to get forced to it. So we're doing the same thing. Again, this is Susanna with Town of Gilbert. We also have solicited a consultant to help us with the writing of our standards and specifications, to, giving them the time to go out and look at other opportunities and options for us to see what we can do to basically put some of these things to effect, not just in a vacuum.
Any other comments or points of discussion that any of the committee members want to bring up, or experiences?
So I hate to be a pest, but although I work for the Town of Gilbert, I'm a Mesa citizen, right on the border of Gilbert, Mesa, Chandler. They just did a micro trenching in our neighborhood, where I live. And I will tell you, it is a long and arduous thing that goes on there. And I would say it's not unlike things that have happened over time. When fiber first was introduced into the state, I was serving as the town engineer up in Fountain Hills, and one of the key points that we found there is, if you don't restrict the amount of open trenching that they have, you end up with miles and miles and miles of openings. In the neighborhood I was in with Mesa, it seems that again was a part of the issue, is that you had it open and it was for a long amount of time. People weren't allowed to park on the street, and there was no way really around that. And so, as you guys and as we are considering that, our citizens are going to be affected by this amount of work that's being asked to happen within our communities. And so anything you can do to consider, limiting the amount of that they can have open, or a street that they can close down, would be extremely beneficial, I think, to our citizens. In addition to that, our staff, recognizing the amount of permitting that we are going to be seeing and that we're being requested of right now, we are adding inspectors just for this purpose, for basically being out there and doing that. So it is happening, I guess, is the other comments I would have to add.
Thank you for that. If anybody else wants to chime in, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Just want to say thank you all for participating in this discussion. This is super important, as you all have said. I am available for any questions or assistance that is necessary, but I think the cross-agency coordination will be very beneficial for everybody involved. So thank you all for listening and participating.
Thank you,
Carrie. This is Brad.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Madam Chairman. This is Brad Novick, Town of Queen Creek. I'd like to jump in one last thing. As Susanna said, there's a lot of things that affects the residents. We do have I'm going to call it a committee. It's a small group of us that, being a smaller municipality, we can all together, and we have brainstormed and thought about things about what happens during construction. How do you get your solid How do you get water services maintained? We've talked about a lot of things both during construction and then afterwards during operation and maintenance issues. So it is something I would recommend everybody do if they're approached, is to really think all those items through and think of it from a resident standpoint, because they are going to be inconvenienced. I think, Maria, I could be wrong here, but I think Mesa ended up having a restriction on how much they could have open at any one time, just to address issues like that. If I remember looking at the design requirements that you folks had for permitting. So there's a lot to be done. It's a great concept, but we even looked at things like, okay, well, if they trench it open, how quickly are they laying that in? Because if they're doing it when it's 110 or 15 out, that trench may disappear before they even get that conduit pushed down into it, just because the expansion of the pavement, during the day. So things like that are items that I think everybody does need to think through thoroughly. There's always great ideas, but sometimes temperature changes whether those ideas are great or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Anyone else have any? I don't want to cut anyone else off. So any other points of discussion, comments? All right. Thank you, Carrie, again. Great information, great discussion. I would like to ask MAG staff if we could have maybe an update to this item, say before the summer, to have a check-in for committee members. We can check on the status of how those details are going, how things are going in general. That way we can keep this, at the forefront of our minds and share those experiences, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the street committee. We'll certainly bring that back. We'll target a springtime. I think based on the feedback of what we've got and the agencies that we've heard from, maybe even we'll see if we can bring some best practices or lessons learned kind of an item along with that, just to share with the committee.
Perfect. All right, we will move on to agenda item number 6, which is the member agency updates. Do any members have updates for the committee? Feel free to unmute yourself. All right, hearing none, I will move on to agenda item number 7, which is the request for future agenda items. Other than the micro trenching, do we have any other agenda items that we'd like to put on a future agenda? All right, as always, if something comes up later, you can always message MAG staff for those future agenda items. We will move on to agenda item number 8, which is the next meeting date. The next meeting date of the street committee will be on January 9th, 2024. And like Patrick said, Bryce will be taking over as the chair. I do appreciate all the committee members as I've been through the chair. Appreciate all your time, discussion. It has been a good experience for myself. And I just appreciate everyone helping me along the way. All right. And I believe we do not need to do a roll call. So it is 1:44. We will close out this meeting. Thank you all for attending the December 12th Streets Committee meeting.